Uh, Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, everyone, depending where you are. Can you hear my voice? This is Tuija from Finland, not China.
Sylvia, I can hear you.
Yes. Okay, good. Really, really good. Welcome to this online seminar which Sylvia is giving about Inuit knowledge in a teacher education program. And as usual, we will be recording this. So can you put the recording on? Yes, yes. And then Sylvia is from Newfoundland Memorial University, but maybe you can introduce yourself and the floor is yours. And we are very much looking forward to this interesting presentation.
Thank you. Do you need my webcam on or just to share my screen?
If you like to share the video of you, that would be fine. We don't have a camera here, but you are welcome to. It's nice to see you when you are giving your presentation.
Oh, okay, well, let's start with this and see if I can switch to the camera. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not sure how to do that and get my webcam on, so we'll just go with this.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd like to welcome everybody. I'm Sylvia Moore. I'm Assistant Professor at the Faculty of Education and the Labrador Institute with Memorial University in Newfoundland, Canada. I'm originally from Nova Scotia. My family is Mi'kmaq, which is a different Indigenous group. I'm based at the Labrador Institute and I'm the faculty lead in the Inuit Bachelor of Education program and the Masters of Education Labrador cohort, and I teach in both of those programs. Before I talk more about the Inuit Bachelor of Education, I'd like to just locate Labrador and the area where the work is taking place. So Labrador is on the northeast coast of Canada. And the Inuit Bachelor of Education is a partnership between Memorial and the Nunatsiavut government. So that shows in the screen on the darker green. That's the Nunatsiavut land claim area. There's some political history that relates to the Inuit Bachelor of Education. First, the Nunatsiavut land claim was settled in 2005, and in that, Nunatsiavut government has the right to take over their own education system. They haven't done that yet, but they say they will when they're more prepared. And having Nunatsiavut beneficiaries trained as teachers is a step towards that self-determination in education. Memorial University also had a presidential task force on Aboriginal initiatives in 2009. There were 22 recommendations in the report, the first of which was for Memorial to have a community-based Aboriginal teacher education program. And that's what the Inuit Bachelor of Education is. The Inuit across Nunangat, which is the 4 Inuit regions, have also developed a national Inuit education strategy, which they published in 2011. It's a strategy for all 4 regions across Canada, and it provides a vision for education and a framework for education based in Inuit worldview, values, and beliefs. And finally, Canada had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which resulted from the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement, and the mandate was to witness, support, promote, and facilitate truth and reconciliation events at both the national and community levels. They published the calls to action in 2015, which had implications for all sectors of Canadian society. In education, some that pertain to the Inuit Bachelor of Education and the work that I'm doing was that it called for developing culturally appropriate curricula and also identifying teacher training needs relating to reconciliation and education. So as I mentioned, the Inuit Bachelor of Education is a partnership between Memorial University and the Nunatsiavut government. The cohort began in 2014, and it's a primary elementary program that's based on the same program that's offered on the main campus of Memorial in St. John's, Newfoundland. An important part of this would be indigenizing and creating culturally relevant education. So culturally relevant teaching is a term that was created by Gloria Ladson-Billings in 1994 to describe a pedagogy that empowers students intellectually, socially, emotionally, and politically by using cultural reference to impart knowledge, skills, and attitudes. So if we want teachers to teach in a more culturally relevant way, then my question is, how do we promote and model that within teacher education? We can talk about doing these things, but exactly what do they look like? And what I'd like to tell you is what we've been doing to not only teach the skills, but to give the Inuit Bachelor of Education students a culturally relevant teacher education program themselves. What I've come up with so far in the process of actually working in this program is that there are 5 main threads that enable us to infuse Inuit knowledge in the program, even though there are no Inuit faculty teaching in the program. So the first is for the program to be learner-centered, so design the learning experiences as a learning framework and give students ample opportunity to provide culturally relevant examples or for them to fill in the framework with cultural materials themselves. For example, them learning to teach to the provincial outcomes for the K-12 schools, but for them to infuse in their lesson plans material that is relevant to Inuit culture, but it will still meet the provincial outcomes. In this example, then, teachers would be seen as a facilitator of learning, and there's definitely an aspect of collaborative teacher-student learning. So in the case of the Inuit Bachelor of Education, when I'm an instructor in any particular course, then I'm also learning along with the students. So my responsibility is to provide a framework for learning that I know is pedagogically sound, and at the same time provide them with an opportunity to bring in their worldviews, knowledge, and beliefs, which I in turn learn as we go along. So the second thread would be to bring in local knowledge. We incorporate that local knowledge through elders and what we refer to as local knowledge holders. In this slide, you'll see Shellen Jodry on the left, who's a writer and a performing artist. And on the right is Bernie Crawford, who's a snowshoe maker. We also had in Joe Gowdy, who's a canoe maker and a storyteller. And so we've had various peoples. We've also had Elder Jean Crane, who's come in on many occasions to work with the students. We also use the land or rely on the land, make reference to the land in different ways in the program. The first would be to acknowledge it as a place, to acknowledge the place of land in Inuit culture, particularly the land of Nunatsiavut, their particular geographic land claim area. Second way to incorporate land is participating in land-based learning opportunities for the IBED students. And the photo that's on the slide is when we took all of the students out dog sledding. We've done various other things such as ice fishing, going out for a boil up, which is having tea and snacks out on the land and a fire, and going to various communities and events. So as well as opportunities to engage students intellectually, socially, emotionally, and politically, The land-based learning becomes a frame of reference for the pre-service teachers to discuss how they can incorporate land-based learning in order to reach the K-6 curriculum outcomes. And that's often a task I will give them when they're developing lesson plans, is to make sure that they have a land-based component in there, and that can take many forms. We usually think of it as actually being out on the land, but it doesn't have to be. It could just be incorporating the land, aspects of the land, or knowledge of it in their lesson plan in some way. We also use Labrador and Inuit specific teaching resources. This is a photo of just some of the things that we've used in the past. I'm currently teaching a course in children's literature, and in that I give preference to Inuit and Labrador children's literature, authors, and illustrators. And in addition to the print-based literature, I also will be including a section on oral traditions and will look to Inuit storytelling as it relates to teaching and learning. For me personally, working in this program, this specific course in children's literature has probably been one of the best learning opportunities for me to really reflect on what it is that I'm doing as an instructor and what we're attempting to achieve, and how that might be different than in other courses in children's literature within Memorial University. And so, like other instructors teaching this course, I also look to award-winning books. I look to the print format, the illustrations, and so on, all those aspects of children's literature, talk about how children's literature can be used within the curriculum, and how teachers can incorporate aspects of children's literature right across any subject area that they're teaching. But what's different is that I've also had to look at what is the Inuit children's literature, and to bring that into the program, and able to get it from our university library, and also to order some extra, to look at how that literature actually reflects Inuit worldview, and how and why teachers would want to use that. We've also interviewed a children's author, and although she's not Inuit by descent, she certainly is in terms of her life and her own children as Inuit. Her name is Ellen Obed. And she, as well as being a children's author, she also has a love of Labrador, and she is also a teacher. It was quite remarkable last week when she joined us through video conferencing and was able to talk a lot about when she first started teaching in Labrador, and the lack of children's literature that would have reflected Labrador or Inuit ways of life, and how she herself took it upon herself to begin to create children's literature for that very reason, that she saw that as something that was missing, and in the books that children read or had in schools, that they didn't necessarily see themselves or Labrador or their way of life or anything that related to them. And so she became a children's author, and most of her books are set in Labrador, and those that aren't are certainly inspired in some way by Labrador. It was also interesting talking to Ellen because, excuse me, she mentioned that oral storytelling, excuse me, is the basis of all literature. And it was interesting to hear her say that, and for us to then talk about the oral traditions and where that might fit in with children's literature, and how it's often missing in such courses, and to figure out how we're going to take that up in this course, how Inuit storytelling relates to teaching and learning, and how we can incorporate it even when it's not in a print format. And I bring all of those examples in because I think that they are certainly the most recent in my own teaching. But I think that they um, give voice to the way in which I, as a non-Inuit instructor, um, bring Inuit culture into my teaching, infuse it in, and how overall in the program I try to encourage other instructors to do similar kinds of things. And finally, the fifth component is in terms of infusing Inuit culture into this teacher education program, is the inclusion of Inuktitut language training. This has a history, which is that Nunatsiavut government is working to rejuvenate the Inuktitut language. And in doing so, they developed a Labrador Inuktitut language training program, which they had just finished developing as we were about to start the Inuit Bachelor of Education degree. And the idea was, why not offer it to the pre-service teachers in this program as a way of seeing how that language program would actually work, so almost as a pilot, but also to bring language training to these pre-service teachers, none of whom speak Inuktitut. Several of them have some understanding of it when they hear it, but none of them were actually speakers. And so Nunatsiavut wanted to offer this program. What we did was agree to have just 4 university courses running in any particular semester so that the Inuktitut language program could run as a parallel program alongside the university. I think it's really important to note that Nunatsiavut runs this program, and although Memorial thought about and offered to take it over and develop it into university credit course format, Nunatsiavut didn't want that to happen. They wanted to run this program themselves and keep ownership of it and so on. And I think that's really important in terms of a university working with an Indigenous community, because that is an example of how we work with an Indigenous community but don't necessarily have to control all aspects of post-secondary education, that we would work together and run these 2 parallel programs. So the students all take Inuktitut classes several times a week, which is figured into the schedule along with all of the other university classes. What's important about this isn't so much that anyone who teaches for Memorial is involved in it, because we're not, but that we see it in the classroom. There's just one classroom for this program, so any instructor who teaches any of the courses, we're in that room whenever we're scheduled. So we see it as in this slide, which is a photograph of one of the bulletin boards with some language, Inuktitut language up on it. So we see it, but we also provide that support for it in terms of scheduling it and agreeing it runs as a parallel program. As an instructor, I also offer the students opportunities to bring Inuktitut into any aspects of project work or assignment work that they're doing for me. Not that I can necessarily, I can't read it and I don't understand it, but that they may see opportunities in developing their lesson plans or such things as developing a learning activity. Or I know that there was one course I taught in when the students were making games, and one student actually wanted to make a game that had to do with Inuktitut. So I completely agreed to that. And then I worked with the instructor of Inuktitut in terms of looking at that final product, the game that the student had created. And so we support it that way and find opportunities to support the students in including it in other aspects of their teacher training program. I believe after working in this program for 3 years now, I believe that these students, although they may or may not be fluent speakers when they leave, I'm not sure of their fluency. They will certainly have learned much Inuktitut, and I believe that they'll also be leaving the teacher education program with a positive attitude towards Inuktitut, and so I anticipate that as they go out into their classrooms when they become teachers, that they will have a ripple effect in terms of being very positive and enthusiastic about learning the language, maybe finding ways to co-teach or develop a project with the Inuktitut teacher in whichever school they may be teaching in. And I believe that that will have some sort of a ripple effect, and we'll do research on that. But this is where this starts in the program that we're running right now, and I think it's important to be able to reflect on how we're doing these things in the program, but also what we're doing, how we're promoting them, will grow and become part of a teacher's skills overall. So I think that Inuktitut is a part of the program, even if it's not one of the education programs. So when the students leave this program, they will have or when they graduate from the program, they will have a Bachelor of Education degree. They will have a certificate in Aboriginal and Indigenous Studies, which would be considered to be a minor area for their non-education courses. And they'll also have a language certificate from the Nunatsiavut government after completing the Inuktitut courses over the 4 years that the program takes place. So just to recap, there are 5 threads that weave together and help us as non-Inuit instructors incorporate or infuse Inuit knowledge and worldview into the teacher education program. So the first is to have the program learner-centered and to make sure that the students have an opportunity to bring in their own world and their beliefs and knowledge. To promote and bring in local knowledge through knowledge holders and elders. To make reference to and rely on the land in the learning activities. To use Labrador and Inuit specific learning resources. And to also promote and make an opportunity, excuse me, for the Inuktitut language. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sylvia, very, very much. And I think that it's we now have some time for questions, so please feel free to ask questions. I think that the best way is to type your question in the chat box, and then Sylvia, you can then respond to those comments or questions. But thank you very much for this. But we might wait a couple of minutes to see if there are some questions or comments.
That's a really good question, Diane. There are no instructors who are participating in the Inuktitut training that the Nunatsiavut government is offering, mostly because they're offering that for their own beneficiaries, and also because the time would be very demanding. I looked at that myself, but I would not actually be able to give up that much time every semester over the course of 4 years to participate in that. However, Memorial University does have 2 linguistics courses in Inuktitut, and there are a number of instructors who have taken those when they're offered here at the Labrador Institute every other spring, and many of the instructors have taken those 2 linguistics courses.
Any other questions or comments? I have one, and I can use my voice. I just wonder. I think that in Canada and in Labrador, you also have guidelines for teacher education programs. So how do you fit in all these Inuit features you were talking about to that teacher education program framework?
Yes, exactly. Thank you for asking that question. I think it's really important to understand that the courses that are being offered in this program are the same courses that would be offered for what we call primary elementary teacher education on the main campus of Memorial. And that's important so that no one would ever be able to suggest that these teachers are getting something less than, or that their training has been different in that way. And so all of the methods courses and all of the curriculum and child development, all of those courses are still offered. But what's different is the way that we teach those courses, maybe the resources we use, bringing the elders in, opportunities. So as I mentioned, the children's literature course, I think, is a really good example. So anyone who takes primary elementary teacher education training at Memorial University will do the children's literature course. I have the exact same syllabus for the course as any of the other instructors. But what I need to do is find the space to put in a unit on oral language, oral storytelling, to link that to children's literature, and also to use a number of, as many as I can, Inuit children's literature, so Inuit children's books as learning resources in the program, and to give a voice and a presence to those. But other than that, the course is the same. So it's this weaving or this balance between infusing Inuit worldview through those threads that I mentioned, and knowing that we have to provide the students with the knowledge and the skills any other pre-service teacher would get through Memorial University. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. That's a very interesting way you are doing that, because I think that the teacher education programs all over the circumpolar north actually have this question: how can we imply the local and traditional knowledge? But you obviously you have the answer. But, thank you.
Well, I think. Yes, sorry. I think it's really important, because if we're asking teachers to do this, and more this is coming up in conversations and education research, I think that we have to go back to teacher education and say, if we want teachers to teach in a culturally relevant way, then what kind of teacher education programs do we have that will provide them with the skills and knowledge to do that?
Exactly.
And this is what we're doing here. Hopefully there's things happening other places around the world and that we can all learn and grow from this. Diane's asking me if there's a community advisory committee alongside the government policy. Diane, I didn't address that earlier, as you note there in your comment. So that's a good question. So when you say government policy, are you talking about government policy for teacher licensure? Just waiting for Oliver, or maybe it's just the language class. Request from the government. So the Nunatsiavut government, yes, they want to run the language program and have authority and control over that. Completely understandable since they developed it. In terms of advisory committee, maybe I'll make a few comments, Diana, and if I don't answer your question, if you just come back with rewording or something. So there is a steering committee for the Inuit Bachelor of Education program, and it's a combination of staff and faculty members from Memorial University, as well as education staff from the Nunatsiavut government. And I think the steering committee would in part play that role of community advisory. But there's a subcommittee to that, and that's the curriculum committee. And that also is made up of faculty. Myself, I chair it, and a staff, education staff from Nunatsiavut government, who is Jody Lane, as well as Martha McDonald, who's the Associate Director of the Labrador Institute, and Martha really takes responsibility for the non-education courses. So the three of us create the curriculum committee, and what we do is before any semester starts, we look at the courses that are going to be offered, any suggestions in terms of resources, ways that we could support instructors in those programs, what we can offer in any way, any other suggestions for the program in general. So the dog sledding trip, for example, was just an idea that Jody Lane and I came up with. It happened at the end, it took place at the end of a curriculum course that I instructed. Wasn't really part of the course per se. I think the students saw it more as a celebration of the semester coming to an end and the course coming to an end. But what I was able to do with that was take it, that experience, take it into the next course I taught and talked about what you'd learn from that kind of an experience, how you can take that back into the classroom and do language arts and writing and photography and talk about the snow and the wind that day and so on and so forth, and how you can tie it in through their own experience. So hopefully I answered your question, Diane. Do the elders also give input as well as helping teach? So I will clarify that the elders who come in do so on a, they aren't regular, and I'm just talking about the university courses, and I'll talk about the Inuktitut language program in a minute, or my knowledge of it. But in the university courses, the elders and the knowledge holders come in on invitation. They're paid honorariums, and it's up to each instructor to determine how what's being said or taught, or the experience students have, such as going and seeing the canoe making with Joe Gowdy and then deciding how that's tying into the course that any of us may be teaching. There is not an elder or elders who advise in this program per se. It is something that I asked for when we were first creating this program. It's not something that MUN has established yet, to the best of my knowledge, in any of the university at all, programs, courses, or the university in general. I do hope that it's something that's going to happen, that we would have an elder in residence or an elder advisor and so on, but we don't have that yet. In the meantime, I remember just before the Inuit Bachelor of Education began, and I called a mentor of mine who had also been on my doctoral committee, and I said to him, this is what's happening, and I really think we need an elder involved, but I can see that that's not something that's going to happen. What can I do? And what he said is, you need to be responsible for yourself, Sylvia, and so if you have an elder you work with, you personally, then that's the elder you turn to, not necessarily to advise you on the program per se, but to advise you in terms of your own work, your own health, and your own thinking and involvement in the program. And so that's what I've done. And there is also an Inuit elder that I work with on a personal basis. You're welcome, Diane.
Any other questions or comments to Sylvia? Please feel free to type your question or comment there in the chat box. It looks like that we don't have any other comments or questions. So thank you very much, Sylvia, for this interesting presentation. And the recording is available will be available on the website fairly soon, so you can then go back and listen and also share the link to this recording with your colleagues and friends who were not able to attend this online meeting. But thank you, Sylvia, and thank you for you others to join us. And we will have our next online seminar sometimes early next year, and that will be announced in our website and newsletter as well. Okay, lovely that you were here, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thanks.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Sylvia.